And here we are back on the couch with Ian Proudfoot from KPMG. Ian, you've been speaking to the RAN stream today.
Yes.
What have you been talking about?
So I've been talking about how food will be produced and consumed over the next 25, 30 years and the impacts that may have on our rural communities.
Okay. So what's going to be happening?
Well, we see some quite dramatic changes because the world itself is changing really quickly. It's been driven by, the growing wealth in the emerging economies of the East. There's a real inability of some of the developed countries to get over the challenges they've had in the global financial crisis. And I suppose what we're seeing is this huge change in technology. And all of that comes together to create a situation where people are going to not just eat different food in different parts of the world, but they're going to want it produced in a different way, they're going to want it produced more sustainably, and they're going to want it delivered to them in different formats and at different times to what we've been used to. So there's some real pressures that are going to come back through our food system and ultimately impact our rural communities.
So is New Zealand going to be impacted more than anyone else?
Well, New Zealand is the only developed country that actually relies on production and sale of food for the major part of its economic wealth, its tradable exports. So we will have a bigger impact than any other developed country. But that means we've got the biggest opportunity as well, because these changes are exciting. And if you think about New Zealand being able to produce enough food to feed 40 million people or so, what we've got to be is really smart about how we don't just try and feed 40 million people their full diet, but we focus on supplying 10% of the diet to the 400 million richest people in the world.
So if you're going to change the types of crops, that means big changes for our rural. So what type of things could we expect?
I think from a rural community perspective, some of the things I've talked about today, what are rural communities going to do and how are they going to respond to some of these challenges? So if you think about from the perspective of being more pressure being placed on farmers to farm in a more sustainable manner, that means more cost. Generally that will mean more debt. Generally that will therefore put more pressure on people when volatility occurs, which it always will do. Agriculture will still be subject to weather. So we're going to therefore see increasing pressure coming on rural communities from sort of ups and downs that are inherent in the sector. And another example we can expect to see is we really need to get talented people into our rural communities, because we're talking about our farming businesses and our producing businesses being the first stage of what is a complex global supply chain. That needs people that have got the skills to be able to see that supply chain through to the consumer at the end and respond to their needs continuously. So while we're seeing a lot of people moving out of rural areas into cities, we need to create a ruralisation trend to encourage talented people to go back to rural communities to lead our farming businesses. And if you think about that, we've then got to really focus on the schools, the roads, the technology, the hospitals, and particularly healthcare professionals that are there to cope with the people or cope with these people and support these people moving into rural areas.
But that's also a big change for the skill set. What a farmer traditionally is the son of a farmer or the daughter of a farmer. So there's quite a change there.
Yeah, so we expect to see more corporatisation, more consolidation of farming businesses. We think that will happen globally, and it will definitely happen here in New Zealand. If you're looking at it from that perspective, we'll see more farm managers, we'll see more people who haven't had that sort of long-term historic connection with the land coming in, but we'll also see a lot more pressure on those people to produce profits than have ever been the case before, because the investors that will be buying those lands and wanting to run them are looking at things through a very different lens to the traditional farm investment of, well, I know I'll realise a capital gain in 25 years. They've got investors who are sitting as pension funds in Canada or the US or Europe or wherever, and they need cash returns year after year after year to meet their obligations. So the whole I suppose fabric of rural communities will evolve over the next 10 to 15 years in quite significant ways.
Now, Ian, you've written a book on this, Agribusiness Agenda 2014. KPMG obviously are taking this reasonably seriously. Your role is agribusiness predominantly?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I'm Global Head of Agriculture for KPMG, and I suppose my role is I lead a team that sits across 23 countries and is working with primary sector companies to, I suppose, address and respond to the big challenges that they're facing in terms of food production around the world. The world itself needs 90% more protein over the next 30 years to not just feed the extra mouths that we'll have, but to meet the demands that people are having. So we're thinking about things like synthetic foods, and what does that mean? We're thinking about things like alternative proteins, and there's a fair chance in 20 years' time dairy on the Canterbury Plains won't be the thing to be doing. There'll be something else that will be better. So ensuring that we are looking ahead and really understanding what the future of food is going to look like, and that New Zealand and our economy, so dependent on it, is able to be proactive in making the changes we need to make to remain a successful, vibrant, prosperous country in the long term, and a country that our kids want to stay in and work from. And
potentially huge impacts on our health service as well, because you think of the type of people we need. You talk about roads, but health is a very vital part of that. So, what are your thoughts on what health services are required?
I think health is a critical part, and to me there's a couple of key areas. One is the role technology will play in monitoring and managing healthcare delivery. And I think that will be really important in rural areas. We're talking about the Internet of Things, this global web of connected devices that some people estimate will be as many as 50 billion connected devices by 2025. A lot of those devices are going to be about health monitoring. So we will have enabled shirts that will be able to tell our cell phones when we're not feeling well. Doctors will be able to collect data and analyse data on their patients, and therefore be able to be far more targeted in when they enter in and engage into people's health, because they'll have the information to tell them when there's something that needs to be engaged. So we need to be enabling our GPs to handle that sort of technology. But also I think health from my perspective is going to become very much more focused around I suppose preventing healthcare problems and issues arising rather than curing them, because of the cost of curing is getting too high. And I think being more proactive in our healthcare provision in rural areas about helping people not get well or ill, rather than trying to fix them when they get ill, is going to become far more important. And I think that's going to require a different skill set amongst our healthcare professionals that are far more engaged in their communities and providing advice up front about what to eat, how to manage your health, how to keep yourself safe and well. And I think, as a consequence, we can get better outcomes, hopefully at a lower cost as well.
Ian, thank you very much for your time today.
And thank you very much.
Hopefully we'll see you next year.
Thank you.